Now, there's something weird that happened in the Gerry Anderson universe over the last few weeks. I don't know if you noticed, a special book has arrived chronicling the adventures of two life-sized mannequins, Candy and Andy, and
so
their
weird.
parents, Mr. and Mrs. Bearander.
Or captors, we don't know.
Anyway, to find out more, I think it's time for our special featurette/interview that happened in the kitchen of my house.
I cannot wait for this. I love your kitchen.
This week's guest thought he'd stumbled into a parallel universe when he walked into a charity shop in the 90s and found a TV annual for sale. A universe where two huge doll children lived in an English village with their panda parents. Turns out it was all true. He's here to tell us more about Candy and Andy and his new book devoted to them. It's Alan Dein. We're here to talk about something rather special. Ordinarily, we have guests along to talk to us about one of Gerry's perhaps more outstanding series. UFO, Thunderbirds, Captain Scarlet and so on. But you're here to talk about something a little different, aren't you?
Yeah, significantly, it's not about a TV series. It's about a comic book and a storybook that was produced at the golden age of Century 21 and Gerry Anderson's work in the 60s. It's called Candy. But Candy was a comic that began in the beginning of 1967, very key year. So Thunderbirds had just finished its TV run. And of course, the whole Scarlet universe was waiting. Next thing was Captain Scarlet on the way. But in the middle is Candy. Right. And Candy is not a TV series. And just to set the record straight, it was never intended to be a TV series.
Hold that thought. That's great. We'll be coming back to Candy very shortly, whetted her appetite. But you may or may not know, with all our guests, we like to play a little game. Good. It's called Super Identification. I'm going to show you some very quick clips from every one of Gerry's TV series, the opening titles. And I'd like you to try and see how many you can identify. So shout out when you see one you know. Ready for this?
I am indeed.
Take a look at this.
Is that Twizzle or Battery Boy? Thunderbird? No, Thunderbird. Oh, that is Supercar? No. That's Thunderbirds and 5. That's Supercar. Firebird. Stingray. No. Perfection. Captain Scarlet. Which I actually love, Joe Nicey. Secret Service. Sort of connection with Candy, actually. UFO. Brilliant. The Protectors. Space 1999.
This is an emergency.
Terrible. Oh, what's that one? Spanner? Dick Spanner, maybe?
The place of legend. Favored
Space Precinct?
Alan, well done.
Yeah.
You actually got, I think there were 18 in total. How well do you think you did?
I think I certainly... 15?
You absolutely got 15.
Okay.
Well done. Yes.
Yeah.
Now,
what did I struggle with?
Well, you struggled with the earlier ones, of course. Twizzle you got. Then Torchy came next, which you weren't quite sure about. Full Feather Falls.
Oh, the cowboy one.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
Now it makes sense.
Yes.
And then we were into Supercar, which you knew straight away, the 5XO5 and so on. And then the later one, Space Precinct, you got a beat later. I think.
Right, okay.
Lavender Castle. Lavender Castle? Gerry's last
I never saw that.
series.
Interesting. No, I never saw that.
Well, then you Captain Scarlet, the last series.
Ah, right, of course.
CGI, the movies.
Yeah.
But well done. So 13 is a very good score.
Okay.
Now, ordinarily, Alan, I would be writing your score on a little maquette of you in a Thunderbird song and sticking it on the table, but we'll have to wait until we're back in the studio to do that.
Okay.
But well done.
I'm pleased. I'm pleased I did okay because obviously I'm here talking about Candy, but I'm also here, of course, because I'm a fan.
Yeah. Well, plainly so. So which came first? Being a fan of the shows or having your work taking you into those shows?
Without a doubt, being a fan. I grew up in the 60s. I was born in 1961. So I'm a child of the 60s. As a child of the 60s, what else is there as well as, the kind of the life of the Beatles, Rolling Stones? Yeah. There is the world of supermarination. And for me, I think my first memory of Gerry Anderson's work was most probably watching a Standard 8 film of Fireball XL5 at a friend's birthday party.
Ah, lovely.
You all sat around. There was a screen put up, and the dad would have the projector, and you'd watch. And I was mesmerised. Yeah. And then I think most probably the first TV series I watched, as it was happening, was probably Thunderbirds. Uh-huh. But of course, all of this was in black and white.
Yeah. Right.
At that time.
Yeah.
So in a way, there was two worlds of Anderson in the 60s. There was watching it on TV. Yeah. And then there was the comics.
Yeah.
And so I think it was the comics as well that really got me into it. Sort of TV 21. That was probably the thing that just because it was so tactile, you could look at it over and over again.
Great.
It wasn't just once a week or anything. It was there all the time.
That's right.
And of course, it was a world before we could repeat anything. The VHS and DVDs and so forth. Yeah. So that was the one thing you could have with you all the time.
Yeah. A previous guest, Lee Sullivan, who's a comics illustrator, talks about the smell of things, the smell of the comics, the smell of the toys. And I think that sort of stuff is so important.
I know, totally. And I think there's two things. There's obviously the kind of the Proustian concept of smell in the sense of as you're much older, looking back in your childhood. But there is something about that tactile quality. And I think the great thing about Supermarination was it was so three-dimensional. Because it wasn't human. Yeah. But it was just felt. It felt like you could sort of touch this stuff. It felt there was something surreal about it. Yeah. And I think that was the power of the Anderson world. And I actually also have a photograph which you could have a look at some point. Yeah. Which is me and my sister dressed up as Captain Scarlet and Lady Penelope. In my grandma's front room. Great. And they were the play suits. We got them for Christmas.
Yeah.
And we are standing there as sort of sentient beings, but totally locked into the world of Anderson. Which was pretty much is a part of how I recall the 60s. Is that world really?
Were those experiences then, as a youngster, instrumental in you becoming a broadcaster, an historian?
I think historian. I started off my working career. I started off as an oral historian. I worked for local museums, and then I moved into the British Library. And I spent some years training as an oral historian at the British Library, and then travelling the nation, interviewing people. Oh. So most of my work was primarily about people's stories, people's life stories. So I was fascinated by the human experience and people telling their stories, and particularly stories that weren't often told. So that was part of my interest, and then I moved into radio broadcasting.
It's funny, isn't it, how each of Gerry's eras of production, shall we say, are so synonymous with the decades in which they're set. If you are a Thunderbirds Captain Scarlet Candy fan, it's all about the 60s. If you're into UFO Space 1999, it's the 70s and the fashions that went with that, and the concepts and the ideas and so on.
Yeah. I think for most of us, that Supermarination period is very specific because it had so much more. It was about the storylines. It was about the incredible kind of concepts around the stories. But I think as well, there was something about the music that was part of it. Mm-hmm. It was such a sense around experience because you got everything. You got these wonderful characters, but the music was it was in your head, and it stays in your head to this day.
Absolutely right.
There was no two ways about it. I think that connection between Gerry Anderson and Barry Gray was an absolute masterstroke. Yeah. I think it lifted everything to another level. Yeah. So I'm a fan, and just sort of stepping forward a little bit. By the 1980s. I kind of was already interested. I was very involved in sort of social movements at the time. I was quite involved in the punk movements. I did fanzines and things like that. And I I kind of was very inspired by what was happening around in the 70s, but at the same time, I kind of lost my way into the 80s. I wasn't really interested in new romanticism. I wasn't really interested in Margaret Thatcher's experiment for the nation.
Yeah.
So I kind of in a way drifted back into the 60s. And interested in the 60s music and so forth, 60s politics. And one of the things that really, I expect, like a lot of people who have had a bit of free time on their hands sometimes, we go into charity shops. And I found this.
Aha, right.
So, and I found this annual. This is the very annual I found.
Yeah.
It was 10p. I remember that. And you can see that, can't you? Candy.
Yeah.
And
when are we talking? When did you discover this?
that must have been about the mid-80s.
Right.
So I was in my 20s.
Yeah.
And, of course, as I was looking at it, I had no memory of Candy at all.
Yeah.
And as I was looking at it, I realised straight away, this is the work of Gerry Anderson. This is the work of Century 21. And I had no idea about it. And of course, it was confirmed because on the credits, it says Century 21, 1967.
But there was something about the quality, the aesthetic.
It's the aesthetic straight away.
Yes.
Obviously, it's the puppets. It's the puppets. But of course, what's so intriguing is that they were life size, which was bizarre. The mini, the stripey mini was just wonderful. And of course, the Bearanders. How bonkers is this? And as I was reading through this annual, I was wondering. Look at the picture of that. It's fantastic. You've got a lovely sort of wintry outing in the stripey mini. The Bearanders, parents, foster parents, guardians, we do not know, with Candy and Andy, but so beautifully constructed and realised it could only be the work of the Anderson team.
Yeah.
Because, of course, the expertise, the skills of the people who were creating the models, the designs, the props were so incredible, as we know. And if they put their minds to something, they could do something like this.
Yeah.
And they could do it quite brilliantly. But, of course, it was wonderfully bonkers.
Now, the first question I would ask if I discovered that from a charity shop in the 80s, well, this is a series. Why don't I remember it?
Exactly. And so, of course, I knew pretty much everything that happened in the 60s.
Yeah.
I was there.
Yeah.
And the fact I didn't remember it, I realised straight away this was not a TV series.
Uh-huh.
This had not been created for the screen at all. This was obviously something that was a sideline, a side project. And then how the story evolves is in the early 90s when I was working for the British Library. I was also working on a project called the Oral History of British Photography. And I thought, why don't I try and find something who took some pictures for Gerry Anderson?
Right.
So at the same time, one of my colleagues on the project was putting together an exhibition at the Barbican Art Gallery in London called Who's Looking at the Family? Val Williams is a very acclaimed photographic historian. And she said, why don't you're interested in Candy, and I just looked at these images and I think they work really well in the exhibition. And so how it came about is that for the exhibition, I got to interview Gerry and Doug Luke.
Right. Okay.
And Doug was one of the great stills photographers who worked with Gerry Anderson for many, many years on so many different projects. And he had been years in the film industry. I think before he worked with Gerry, he was working on the Beatles' Help film,
right,
and then moved on to from the Beatles to Thunderbirds.
Yeah, there you go.
Exactly. They were a bit hazy about Candy. Doug had photographed Candy a lot, but I think it's so many other things he'd done. And he remembered certain things very well. Yeah. And other things he sort of struggled with a bit. Yeah. So there was still a lot of research to do. Yeah, yeah. In the meantime, I had put the word about that I was interested in Candy. Someone had heard about it as a dealer at a comics convention. And he'd found some original transparencies. Right. From Candy. Yes. Which told a lot because, of course, some of them were 2-inch square, some of them were larger format. The quality was superb. And looking at those transparencies, it really kind of captivated me to find out more. When you look at the original Transparencies, the quality, it just is on another level, of course. So you're literally looking into that world, the world that was produced at the time for the comic book. So it was so beautiful. So I was so intrigued by that. And then really, what happened was that the exhibition opened at the Barbican with, endorsed by Gerry and Doug, because they were in the exhibition.
Yeah.
And so there was a great deal of excitement around it, and there was some articles in the papers about Candy. It's interesting. The exhibition has some great photographers from all around the world, past and present, and the press were intrigued about Candy.
Really?
They were thinking, Lady Penelope's long lost niece.
Okay.
I think that was the Daily Mail.
Does that quite work?
But because they knew Anderson Thunderbirds.
Yes.
Candy. We'd never heard of it. These are intriguing. They're bizarre. They're strange. They're fascinating. What is it about them? Why don't we remember? It was done with incredible expertise, but it just didn't seem to click.
Mm.
It didn't last. It lasted, give or take, a year.
Right.
It's a very short life.
Yes.
So really, what happens is that as I was researching the project, I found the annuals. What was more difficult to find with the comics, because things like TV21, which are obviously all of your viewers are totally know. This is actually what I think my only copy of it actually, but it's classic, isn't it? This is from 1966. This sold in huge numbers, but it was treasured. These were treasured by an older reader. But of course, Candy comes along, beautifully produced. That's the comic that came out in January 1967. And the thing about this is number one of Candy, and you turn the page, and you've got beautiful colour, the same printers as TV21.
Right. Okay.
So it's really beautiful. So the photographic strips are incredibly well produced, and then you have the likes of Winnie the Pooh, Thunderbirds for little children, which is so interesting.
Yeah.
Tinker and Tucker, who were a popular TV feature at the time.
Right.
A lovely image of Stripey, Bengo. So what you get is a mixture of Candy, which is the photography, with strips, with comic strips for the youngsters. I managed to find obviously I researched and found more issues of Candy, found more annuals and storybooks, and really, it's amazing. These storybooks there's another annual here, another storybook. This is wonderful. It's so wonderful. There's a penny for the guy. I particularly like that one. So what's so interesting is that Thunderbirds, Scarlet are going to be in the future. Candy is now. So it's a little bit like Joe 90 with now.
Yeah.
But Secret Service and so forth.
Yeah.
But Candy is now. But also the whole point of it, because it was photographic, and Candy and Andy were the same size as children of their age. They could interact. So there was lots of imagery of Candy and Andy with real children.
Quite bizarre.
And real children were invited to join them, in the comic competitions. When there's competition, have a day out with Candy and Andy. Go to Longleat, see see the wildlife with Candy and Andy. So they were your friends.
Yes.
And of course, the question that most probably a lot of people are totally intrigued about is that, yes, Candy and Andy are lifelike. They look like a boy and a girl, albeit a boy and a girl who have escaped the village of the damned, the classic film of John Wyndham's Midwich Cuckoos, the blonde-haired spooky alien children. But nevertheless, their parents aren't humanoid in shape.
Yes.
They are giant pandas.
Yes.
Now, when I interviewed Gerry Anderson, this was back in about 93, so this is 30 years ago.
Yeah.
He thought that the panda element was a brilliant idea because the nation had gone panda crazy, giant panda crazy in the late 50s, because Chi-Chi had arrived from China all the way to London Zoo. Yeah. And people were queuing around the block to see this giant panda. We'd gone giant panda crazy. Here's the book. So the book comes out at the end of October. Jamie does the introduction, and There's a foreword, and I write the essay about the story of Candy, and it's a series of photographs. And these are all taken from the original transparencies. And then I think that's another touch. I think I mentioned it earlier, but what's beautiful, because it's photography, and because the comics and the annuals did use a much cruder form of paper, they never intended to reproduce the photographs in their magnificence. What you get for the first time is really beautifully produced examples of these incredible photographs that were taken. I love the one of the blacksmith.
Yeah.
So Candy, now you meet the blacksmith at the neighbouring village, and this is Mr. Sibley, who was from a long family of blacksmiths.
Right. Okay.
So he was kind of well known in the village.
I see. Yeah.
So real kids sort of waving Candy and Andy goodbyes after a lovely adventure. It's there's the Mini again. And also, let's face it, the Mini. If there's ever a symbol of 60s Britain, I know the Mini actually was invented in the late 50s.
Yeah.
But it's ever a symbol of 60s Britain is the Mini. Yeah. And of course, the stripey Mini, it's a boot, isn't it?
Now, tell us how the book came about then.
Right.
Where did the idea come from, and who approached who?
So what happened with the book is that I have been sitting on this stuff, and I'd worked with Four Corners publishers on a previous book. And we were in conversation. I said, well, I've got these negatives. I've got these transparencies. This is what they are. They looked at them, took one look and said, these are fantastic. These are fabulous. They've never been reproduced like this. Let's put a book together. Yeah. And we approached Gerry Anderson, and Jamie was delighted to be part of it. And thought, wrote the forewords and sort of, in a way, I'm sure he would agree. This is part of the wider picture of what the Anderson team were doing at that time.
Yes.
And I think it needs to be out in the world. And I think the other thing about the book publishers, Four Corners, they're an art book publishers, and I think they took an artistic perspective. They wanted a book to look something a bit special, and they produced something that was very tactile. It's lovely.
It's lovely,
lovely black and gold cover with this is one of Doug Luke's photographs on the cover. And just beautifully produced. I just think it sort of, in a way, lifts Candy into the 21st century.
Right. Yes.
And I think it's a good chance for people. Of course, I'd love to think that the Anderson fans would enjoy it. Yeah. But a wider audience as well. Younger people who may be not aware of that world. Yeah. Could see this and just see. I think what is interesting, why it fits into the Anderson world, is that obviously Gerry was fascinated with puppetry, miniature. Obviously, this is real size, but there is something about the miniature, the image of a plastic coated boy and girl that still fits into the sort of Anderson oeuvre.
Well, I mean, talking of that, where does it sit then in the Anderson legacy? Does it deserve its place, do you think, in the whole stretch of?
Of course, it deserves its place. Obviously, as I am not bigging up Candy as a sort of rival to the masterpieces. I'm a child of the 60s, so for me, Stingray, Thunderbirds, and Captain Scarlet, and Fireball. I just, I can go on. Yeah, we could go on. And so I wouldn't compare them. I wouldn't. I think they're different, but I think it's important to recognise that if you're doing something creatively at a time and you have got a team of such talent around you, you can have a go and do something and try. And I think it was an experiment that didn't work, but I think that it was a success in its own right because it was done so well. And I think that's the important thing. And of course, it's a heck of a lot of fun. Yeah, it's completely.
That's right. It is. Yeah.
And I think that, as I said, I'm trying to kind of give you an art perspective of it, but it is wonderfully bonkers, and I think that is part of the charm as well. Yeah. And I think the other thing is, just briefly, is I talked about the sort of Englishness of it, and I think that there's something interesting about how sort of the nation looked in colour in the 60s. Because if you go back to, even Anderson's work, if you go back to Torchy, or even Supercar,
Mhm.
Fireball.
Mhm.
They're very much part of the black and white world. They're the 50s, Fireball is the kind of the 60s coming in.
Yes.
But all of a sudden there's this explosion of colour
Yeah.
as the nation swings.
Yeah.
Carnaby Street and everything.
Yeah.
And I think in a way, Candy's very much part of that. It's very much part of the quaint English village, which was sort of old fashioned, the old blacksmith and so forth, which was, you could imagine old photographers going around with black and white pictures, taking them.
Uh-huh.
All of a sudden, this is in swinging
Yeah.
British in 60s colour.
Yeah.
And I think that that's also part of the charm, is it really captures the nation of that time. So I think it's a fascinating.
You seem
fascinating project.
a little like a man on a mission to bring this stuff more into the public eye. Is it job done, do you hope? Or do you have more plans for Candy and Andy?
It would be amazing if someone said, "I love this so much, I'd love to turn it into some kind of super marinated project, or some kind of."
Yeah.
And so, let's wait and see. I think the key thing is, what I really would like to do is to kind of offer up this book as an opportunity to see what was going on at that time, and what Candy was about, where it would lead to.
Mm-hmm.
That would be also up to those who read the book, enjoy it, and see what they get out of it. And I'd be very interested to hear from Anderson fans themselves about how they think it could be developed. It'd be interesting to hear from Jamie if he thinks there's a way of developing it in other ways.
That's right.
If there is an interest, you never know. People
know.
might look at it just as they did in the 60s and think, this is too bonkers. This is so out there. Slide it at the bottom of the kind of the stack of books. So you never know.
You say that you'd like to hear from Anderson fans about their experience of the book. So where can they get in touch with you? Are you on any social medias? Or
the best one is most probably Instagram.
Yeah,
Instagram is where I'm also promoting the book on Instagram.
Okay,
so you can find me on Instagram, and also I think that obviously through you, it would be great to, if anyone wants to write directly to you, that'd be fantastic. And pass it on, that'd be fantastic.
Yes,
you say I'm a man on a mission. To a certain extent, of course, I am, because I'd like to. Candy had been forgotten.
Yeah,
and I do feel it's important to have an opportunity, if an opportunity arose, to be able to present this work. In it. And obviously, the sad thing, of course, is that what has been lost.
Yeah, indeed.
Just like so many other things.
That's right.
When I met with Doug, he had 4 transparencies in a little portfolio of his work over the years.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
There's nothing, so much of it. And I suppose that in a way that is interesting, is the transience of that time.
Mm-hmm.
Is that no one thought, did people think that we'll be talking about Thunderbirds and everything else?
That's right.
In the 21st century, century 21.
Yeah.
It was like so many toys and programs for kids. They're of their time, and things move on. But there's been this ongoing fascination with the work of Anderson, which I think is there because it's great. Yeah. So.
It's been fascinating talking to you. So very enlightening. Candy, Andy and the Bearanders. There it is. It's a beautiful thing. I think available through the Gerry Anderson store.
Yes.
So we can find it there. But in the meantime, thank you so much for joining me. Alan Dein.
It's a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you, Richard.